Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, brother?
Not too much, Yariv. Doing well. Obviously, the Flyers begin the season 1-3-1 here in 5 games, so they're not doing as hot. Shameless plug, I did just write an article for FlyersNittyGritty.com pointing out 5 observations from the first 5 games, so check that out on Flyers Nitty Gritty. And a lot of, what essentially I wrote in that article is what we're going to discuss today. We're going to really go in depth to the first 5 games and kind of what we have viewed. So excited for this episode. How you doing, man?
Doing all right, dude. Doing all right. And yeah, that record is unfortunate, but it kind of is what it is. It's not that big of a deal. Not the way people I'm hearing talk online and the doom and gloom that has come over so quickly. What's funny, man? That's like I keep thinking back to what I've been saying, what we've been saying on this podcast is like everybody wants a rebuild, but when it's happening in front of your face, like you can't actually handle a rebuild because a lot of people will tell you all of a sudden the Flyers are not rebuilding. They're like changing the narrative, and it's like, no, this is it. That's why it's like relatively the same team of young guys.
And they have 6 picks in the first 2 rounds coming up.
Right.
I mean, typically a rebuilding team wouldn't have that much draft capital, right?
Right.
So.
They also would have made changes to improve their team dramatically to go for a playoff position. They would have gone for free agents. They would have done some of these things. None of that happened. And it's just so funny. I'm already hearing people talk about like trading guys and after 5 games. It's just I understand it. I empathize with it because I also, it doesn't feel good to lose.
You want to see the team do well, obviously.
Yeah. I empathize with it, but the jump to, and I'm seeing the fire Tortorella stuff already. And
I just find it funny because a lot of the narrative from much of the fan base is they desperately wanted this rebuild.
Right.
But it's, like you said, right? It's a harder thing to stomach when you're actually going through it versus the idea of it. So
yeah. And this is the team that almost made the playoffs last year. Imagine being like at the bottom of the league, like a team, or imagine being a team like Buffalo that has been rebuilding for like a decade. You know? Just and they're like still worse than the Flyers.
Well, it just shows, right? Like there's certain ways to do it that might actually work and might not, and it depends, right? Each kind of approach has its cons and its pros, but I do like the way the Flyers are kind of approaching what they're doing here instead of tearing it down. I think that not always has a negative effect, but I think more often than not it does more harm than good in a lot of situations. But
they didn't do like the full blanket, rip the team apart and they like have been slowly removing guys from the lineup and replacing them with young guys rather than just collapse the team, tank, because the tank element, people might get tired of us saying this, but it is true, is like you also have to get lucky in those tanks. And like Macklin Celebrini is a great prospect, right? But like how often are guys like even a guy like Elias Pettersson, who's great, right? Fantastic young player, came into the league, fantastic. He's like not a franchise player, like at least not yet. He's not like Alex Lafreniere, right? Which New York got lucky taking him. He's not a franchise player yet. Maybe he's going to become that, but like these guys don't like they're not Bedard, right? Like even Bedard isn't Bedard yet, right? Like McDavid was like an exception to the rule.
Yeah, that happened once in like a 15-20 year span.
Right, exactly. Nathan McKinnon also like took some time. Like most of these guys take time to become who they are. So it's like no matter what, you got to wait. Doesn't matter if you tank your team or do it this way. It's all like a work in progress.
There's growing pains whenever you're trying to build a foundation, especially with younger players. So.
Yes, 100%. So, okay, before we get into it, because we're already starting, which I like. But yeah, just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. If you're listening right now and you are not subscribed, please do so right now. Hit the notification bell on YouTube for notifications to find out when these episodes come out. For the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. We're available in the other audio avenues as well. but those are the ones we pay attention to the most. If you give us a follow on Spotify and iTunes and give us a rating there again, if you can. The ratings have slowed down on the audio, but if you're listening on audio and you haven't so far, a 5-star rating would be most appreciated. Again, helps us grow our show, and liking, subscribing, rating, these are the best way to support us. So please do that. And also shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Go to Jim Steaks to get yourself a cheesesteak, or to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. Jim's has one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. It's hockey season. Make sure to go to South Street and grab yourself a cheesesteak from Jim Steaks, and also grab one at the stadium when you're there. They are available at the Farg, which will only be named the Wells Fargo Center for this last year, which is going to be weird. We'll talk about that as we know more details. The other thing, please check out Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Make sure to go to Summit Public Adjusters for all your insurance adjustment needs. They will help you facilitate the process between you and your insurance company. They will help you with the paperwork, the claim, all of the headaches that come with a claim, with an insurance claim. So make sure to go to Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also want to give a brief shout out to our partner, SportsSpider.com. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date as possible on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, hit the link in the description and check out SportsSpider.com. Again, the link is in the description. All right. So we'll do a little bit of Flyers news. We'll talk about some players individually. We'll talk about, Vasili's going to hit you guys with a bunch of stats from his latest article, and he mentioned it already. That article is cooking right now. It's on fire. Make sure to check out his latest that just came out, but we're going to reference some of the material here, and then you can read it again. Again, you'll find it on our official Flyers Nitty Gritty Twitter channel, Twitter page, and Vasili's tweeted it out. I have reshared it, and we'll do that again. Especially after this episode comes out. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about new lines that have been announced, both even strength and power play. Some interesting stuff that I imagine a lot of people will not be happy about. I've already seen some unhappiness about it, but we'll get into it, and we'll talk about the pluses and minuses of both. We're going to talk about a little bit of goaltending. We'll review a little bit about the Phantoms. I did get to watch their latest game. I was watching it in passing as the Flyers were playing, so I was trying to keep an eye on kind of their progress. So I'll do a quick update on that, and we'll keep that short. And then we'll do our prospect update at the end, where we go through all of the players in the system and just give you a kind of a quick update on them, at least from a statistical standpoint. Just keep you up to date. All right. Let's get into it. So the first piece of news is Emil Andrae has been sent back down to the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. He did stay with the Flyers since Nick Seeler was unable to go, so he did join them on their road trip. He was with them for their home opener, did not play a game, but was inevitably sent down. We assume that it's because Nick Seeler is ready to go. We'll talk about that in depth in the line updates, but I saw a lot of people, Vasili, talking about how it was like kind of a waste to play Andrae, like why? And I was listening to Flyers Daily, and they kind of like left this detail out, which I was a little surprised about. That him and Bill were like, well, like why not call up Yinning? Why not call up one of the other guys? And honestly, I completely understand why they did it. They talked about size, and I believe 100% that is the reason Andrae did not play. Is because the back end is already not that big and strong, and Andrae is undersized. And the role that they needed was a physical defenseman. You and I have talked about this endlessly in the preseason and the offseason, how the roles matter, and Andrae would be called up for a more offensive role. I get why people want to switch him out for Zamula and all this stuff. We can talk about that a little bit later. But really, the biggest thing is it's a reward. And a lot of people might not see it as that because he gets called up. But the reality is he's on a two-way contract. He's making 8 times the amount of money when he gets called up to the Flyers. So he just got a large bonus. He didn't get to play, but he did get a substantial amount of money, especially for a young guy like himself. So while a lot of us like on surface level be like, oh, you're just wasting the kid's time, he's getting paid significantly more than he does playing in the AHL. So that is something to keep in mind. It is still a reward for him to get called up. You might be upset that they didn't use him, but I wouldn't say in his mind it was a complete waste. It's also easy to say he had a great preseason, which I agree, especially second half of his preseason. He did look good, but Zamula also had a great preseason, and you saw how that didn't necessarily translate as much to regular season because they're very different animals. What makes you think that Andrae would also not struggle, going into the regular season? So, Vasili, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just think the fact that he didn't draw in isn't too surprising to me. Like, obviously, Nick Seeler is the defenseman the Flyers are missing. He brings that physical presence, so it's just a natural fit to have Eric Johnson replace him versus it being Emil Andrae.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they do realize that Igor Zamula is going to be here for the long haul, at least for this season, obviously. So it makes sense that, let him kind of get comfortable, get into a rhythm. Why replace him for Andre when you know after this trip it's likely that Zamula's still going to be the guy you're going to keep up, and you really want Andre to go down to the AHL, be the number one defenseman for the Phantoms, essentially. But yeah, you read my mind, really, Yariv. I was going to say the same thing, that firstly, this is a reward for Andre for having a really good training camp. We still have to remember the team's trying to build a culture, set an example. So they want to show the players that, hey, if you perform well in a training camp environment like that, if you earn yourself a spot, you will be rewarded by making the opening, not the opening night roster, but essentially being able to come on a trip like that for the opening like Western road trip that they had. And to your point, the second thing is, he's, getting paid significantly more, being up with the NHL team. And while people might not think that, money is a huge thing, I will tell you that for especially a younger player like Andre that hasn't really cut his teeth yet in the NHL, I mean, I would imagine it's probably a pretty big deal to get that NHL salary versus AHL salary. So like you said, it's a reward, for him. And I think, we'll likely see him called up as long as the roles, account for it. And what I mean by that is, if you have a more offensive type defenseman down the line here throughout the season get hurt, that's when you'll see Andre get called up and probably find his way into the lineup here.
Yeah, and just to completely guess on what this would be, I just kind of ran the math real quick on. I don't even remember his exact salary number, so definitely take this number with a grain of salt. But pre-tax, anywhere between $45,000 to $50,000 he just collected over 5 games.
I mean, yeah, that's significant for sure.
Yeah. So for an NHL player that's a regular, okay, they see that money pretty regularly, especially if you're like one of the better players in the league. You see that substantially more than that all the time.
An AHL salary compared to that is peanuts, right?
Yeah, you're making, again, like probably $2,000, $3,000, $4,000.
Hey, like one of us regular schmucks.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You're making normal human money. Yeah. So I do think it's important to remember that. I do believe he will play substantial games in the NHL, like actual a role in the NHL at some point. To assume we will not have injuries is crazy. There will definitely be injuries this year, and it will be to somebody we don't want to get injured. And Andre is the clear-cut number one call-up from the D. Even with Yinning fit, and you can see that because Yinning fit the role of what they needed better, and they still went with Andre, right? They played Johnson because of the size and the defensive defenseman role, but they could have called up Yinning, right? They could have called up McDonald. They could have called up Belpedio, right? They could have called up other guys to just sit there, but they wanted to reward Andre because of where he is in their mind.
Exactly. I think it's just basically, like you said, a reward for him saying, hey, you're so close, keep up what you're doing, and you're going to be here very soon, right?
And here's some cash.
Yeah.
And maybe they didn't know that he wouldn't play a game. They thought maybe he would get a game, but he didn't get a game in the end. I think they knew that chance was high, but they still paid him to be there. So, and they don't have to do that, right? They could have gone with another guy and paid him extra. So it's important to remember this is still a business, and these guys are still earning a salary. And yes, there are millionaires, but majority of players that are associated with the AHL and the NHL level, are not multi-millionaires, right? A lot of these guys are riding on, even if they're one-way contract. Let's say like you're the best player in the AHL, you're making like 400 grand a year. Look, that number is nothing to scoff at. You're still a one percenter statistically in America. But you're not, you know what I mean? Like 40, $50,000 extra goes a long way, especially when you have a family and whatnot. So he's a young guy. So that's like, to some people, that's life changing money, not to a, professional athlete, but it's a substantial amount of money he's going to get. So I understand it. So I guess that does lead us to the fact that we do believe that Sealer is returning. We'll talk about that.
It's actually confirmed, Yariv.
Yeah, it is confirmed to. Well, did the Flyers state it, or is it just confirmed from the lines?
No, so Jordan Hall tweeted earlier. Nick Sealer confirmed he'll make his.
Oh, he did. Okay,
Tuesday.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, beautiful. Thank you for correcting me. Okay, so yeah, that is confirmed. We know he's in the lines. We're gonna go through the lines a little bit later. But yeah, it looks like good news is Sealer is feeling better. Hopefully he's got full feeling back in his leg, and that he's not powering through it. I assume they took their time, but we don't really know. But we'll see. So our next topic is Joel Farabee. And the trend of Farabee's playing time has kind of changed a little bit. He was given a little more ice time last game, but still kind of sits in that point where he's just under 15 minutes. That the Flyers actually did spread out the minutes pretty well in the previous game. There wasn't as many dominant minute eaters. Like even on D, it was spread out more. But prior to that, his first game in Vancouver, he played 14 minutes, 15 seconds. Second game against Calgary, he played 13 minutes, 25 seconds. Third game, 13 minutes, 30 seconds. Seattle, 12 minutes, 55 seconds. And then last night, 14 minutes, 51 seconds. So high of the season. Little surprising, especially when you look at the game in Seattle. He was coming off 3 points in 3 games, a goal and 2 assists. Since then, obviously, he's -4 in 2 games. He did have 22 shifts in the last game. He had 3 shots on goal. He had a block, a hit. I think he had like 4 hits in that game. He is kind of all over the place, at least, to the surface level. Now, the team has been struggling at even strength in general. But it is surprising that he hasn't gotten kind of more playing time even before the Vancouver game. I suspect we might be seeing that. It seemed like Tortorella was kind of prioritizing playing Luchanko a little bit, and we're going to talk about Luchanko. And I think that was kind of taking a minute from each player, like in the lineup, because he was like trying to make sure Luchanko had like 15 minutes a night, and as he should, because you wouldn't have him here if he's playing like 11 minutes a night or whatever. But I do think that they have to ramp up his usage as well. I think there's some serious untapped potential within Joel Farabee. You and I have talked about it considerably over time. And he was so good at 5-on-5 last year. And this is something that the Flyers are struggling at mightily right now, which is crazy to say because this was not an issue last year at all from the very beginning of the season. Till essentially the end, except for the one losing streak that they had. They were a very good 5-on-5 team. And now it seems to be like the opposite, where they're kind of relying on special teams. And Joel Farabee is not playing a huge role in special teams either. So it seems like they should use him more, in an even strength category. But what are your thoughts on Joel Farabee and I guess his usage right now with the Flyers?
Yeah, I think Farabee's been one of the better forwards in terms of just being noticeable on the ice, being involved in scoring chances, directly being involved in driving play and creating scoring chances at 5-on-5, which has been obviously a struggle for the Flyers, as we've seen, right? Like you alluded to, their special teams has carried them a lot. They've actually been outscored 16-6 at 5-on-5, so that's a negative -9 goal differential at even strength there. So that's not something you ideally want to see to start a season. But Farabee, I think, has been one of their better forwards, so it's a little puzzling to me just when you look at his usage, right? He's had 13:47 average time on ice throughout the first 5 games. He does have 3 points in 5 games. I just think compared to some other players who have been doing less, he probably does deserve a little bit more usage, a little bit more 5-on-5 play. Like, for example, I think a comparison here would be Owen Tippett. Like, Tippett's been all over the ice in terms of, he's created scoring chances as well. Nothing just seems to be going in for him at the moment.
Yeah.
And I totally understand the coaching staff because they are playing Tippett a lot because they probably feel as though once he gets that first goal to drop, the floodgates are going to open, and I understand that. But I just do think that you're underutilizing Farabee, a guy who seems like he is in maybe a little bit more of a rhythm than a guy like Tippett to start. Whereas maybe if you give Farabee some of those extra minutes, there's a couple more goals or maybe a little bit more offensive production to be found. Like, to compare, right? Farabee's 3 points in 5 games, 13:47 average time on ice, where you have Owen Tippett 1 point in 5 games, 18 minutes and 4 seconds average time on ice. I just think for Farabee, a guy's been producing more, maybe a little bit more ice time for him versus a guy like Tippett who really hasn't produced as much as Farabee has, despite the fact that he's hit a bunch of posts, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and Tippett's a tough one because like visually in the eye test, he's passing offensively. But at the same time, like you thought when Farabee was coming in with 3 points in 3 games and playing well in the preseason, they would have kind of elevated him a little bit. They did test him out in a higher role, but these lines are not sticking longer than a game at this point. So things are kind of
they're in the blender.
Yeah, they're in the blender. That's a good way of putting it. So it's interesting to see. I imagine this will change. But the thing I do like about Farabee, like he dropped the gloves. People might not like that, but he is fighting out there. Like he is trying. I don't think it's so much like an issue of effort with this team's struggles, right now.
It seems to be more execution based to me, Yariv.
Yeah, they're just like slightly off and enough to make huge gaffes in the game, or where they'll lose a game within like 5 minutes, right? Which we did see a little bit of that last year. Hopefully they're getting that out of the way this time, but I do think that there is opportunity for Farabee to play a larger role in the lineup, especially if you're not going to be using him like heavily on the power play, right? If he's just like a second unit power play guy, you can utilize him more at 5-on-5 because that is actually his specialty is 5-on-5, especially analytically.
And he's not really being utilized in the PK much either, I don't think.
Right, so. Which that could change over time too, but
if you're not going to give him special teams, I think it makes sense to pile the minutes on at 5-on-5, right. And at least utilize that forechecking ability, because I think his forechecking, his ability to kind of win board battles really is effective in driving play at 5-on-5 typically. And the Flyers, where have they been, the worst so far in their game at 5-on-5? So
should move him back to center. Kidding.
That'd be interesting.
I would be.
I didn't mind his play at center when they tried it, but I just think at this point that's the boat has sailed, unfortunately.
The problem with putting Farabee at center is that you have to put a center on the wing to compensate for the fact that he's just not going to be that good at face-offs.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not great, and it's not something you want to do. It's something you want to test out in the preseason, not something you want to just throw a guy in. And they already tried that, and he's not going to be like terrible at it, but it's also not his best suited position. I think he is best on the wing. I just think he has the mindset and the responsibility of a centerman built in him. This is also why I think he's successful at 5-on-5. And I think there's a lot more there to it. A lot of the excitement that came in from the preseason seems to be, not even preseason, from the offseason seems to be kind of worn away at this point. Just because of and that's how things go, right? Like,
but still, such a small sample size, right. So you have to take it with a grain of salt, being 5 games only.
Yes. Yeah, and Jason Martinez said it best on Flyers, on the daily podcast that he does. If this happened like after 20 games and they had a record of 1-3-1, the panic would be a lot less, right? But it just happened to be at the beginning of the season where, quite frankly, I will say that last game, that was like a trap game. You're coming from a tough road trip. You have to turn over. Your opponent is waiting for you there already. They're well rested. You're not well rested. And a lot of it was a puck luck issue. Like, yeah, they didn't play their best hockey, but that 3-0 loss is very deceiving. And when we talk about the Phantoms, also, I'm going to bring up the exact same thing, because it's kind of a deceiving thing because they had enough scoring chances in that game to tie that game.
Yeah, just not a lot, not enough finish, and just I would really say a lack of execution. Like they seemed like they're either, a pass away from executing on a goal, or missing a pass, or just being like a slight hair from scoring based off like a shot and hitting
Yeah.
a post. So
Yeah,
just not a lot of things going their way, unfortunately.
and I remember one play that Sanheim had where he was on a 2-on-1 where he was like thinking past the whole time, even though he had a clear shot at the net. And he passed, and the guy wasn't there. I forget who he's rushing up the ice with. And it just completely swung momentum the other way. And it was just like those things where it's like, you had 5 shots on net at the time. Like, you got to just shoot, dude. You got to get
Yeah.
like, they are not, and I think Tortorella said this in his press conference too. Like, you're just not, you have to be hungry to score. Like, people have to be aggressive to score, cannot be afraid to shoot the puck, and you have to have the confidence to beat the goalie. Otherwise, that confidence chips away. And that's the one thing I will say about Tippett. It has not chipped away at his confidence to take those opportunities. So they're telling him the right things behind. Even though he's kind of snake bit right now, he's not playing like he's snake bit necessarily. The results are, but he is still grabbing his opportunity. He's still rushing the net. He's still acting like a goal scorer.
Taking a lot of shots. That's what you want to see. I mean, one's going to drop eventually, and then he's going to probably get on a big hot streak, considering the cold streak he's on. But I will say there's one play where I wish he would have made a pass on that 2-on-1 with him and
Michkov
in the Vancouver game, where you want to think like he's in his mind probably saying, I want this first goal so bad. Like, I'm a shooter. I'm going to take the shot. But I think if he makes that pass, you have to think it's probably in the net.
Yeah. I will say that Lackinen. Is that his name? Lankinen. Whatever the hell, however you say
Lankinen, yeah.
Lankinen. That's it. Thank you. He did get a piece of that one. So it was a good shot in the end, but I don't disagree. That actually was the better option, the 2-on-1 pass. But I will say, I'll never really rip a guy for shooting, especially in getting it on net.
And he has a great shot. So it's not that, like I said, not the end of the world, but I would have liked a better decision, unfortunately, on that.
Yeah. One. In that specific instance, yeah. So the next guy we want to talk about is Sean Couturier, and Coots we're in a whirlwind with him. Right before his 800th game, and as he told us, he wasn't really informed till right before the game. He was shifted to fourth line left wing, and I think that threw everybody off quite a bit, especially because Coots has not been playing poorly either. Now you can justify it from the fact that Scott Laughton had a 3-point night, 2 goals, 1 assist in the previous game. And I think maybe the Flyers wanted to reward him. Also, there is clearly chemistry with TK and Laughton right on the PK. They're very dynamic together. So maybe that was part of the thought behind it. And then the third element of it is, while they're not saying it out loud, there does seem to be some kind of management here going over Coots' like ice time and not bringing him the same way he did last year and kind of overloading him. Again, he did have surgery again in the offseason, so it's important to remember that. But just randomly moving him to left wing when he's your best, clear-cut, best face-off guy. Having said that, I have kind of thought about it a little bit. He's right around the age where Claude Giroux was moved to the wing. Claude Giroux is also a great face-off man and one of the best centers in the NHL, like clear cut. I don't hate the idea of him playing on the wing, but I think just the way it came about it, and then it was like fourth line wing, where it's like if you're gonna put him on the wing to bring out his game, his offensive game, don't put him on the fourth line, and that fourth line was not as good without Laughton on it, and it's like, why not? Like that was an example of like the line was working. Why don't you do what you normally did, where you keep them together and just play them more?
That's exactly the point I wanted to make, Yariv. That was my thought, and that was the weirdest thing about the whole Couturier getting moved to fourth line left wing. Is it's like, okay, sure, you're rewarding Laughton. He scored 2 goals. You want to move him up to second line center effectively. I understand that aspect of it. What I don't understand is your best line the game prior was that Laughton, Hathaway, Paling line. So why would you break that up when it was consistently, creating scoring opportunities? You might as well keep them together, since you've been so kind of hard pressed to find any consistent offense and, consistent pressure and sustainability of that at 5-on-5. So that's what's puzzling to me is, sure, you want to play Couturier less, you want to play that line more, go ahead and do that. But I think moving Lawton away from that fourth line just didn't make a lot of sense. But in terms of the Couturier, fourth line left wing and it being his 800th game, I do think it's just really strange with him being the captain. Like, it's your 800th game. You have the coach kind of come and tell you you're going to be the left wing on the fourth line when you've been a center pretty much your whole career. I mean, no matter what you say and no matter what people say that, oh, it doesn't affect the players and the players aren't aware of what's happening, and it's a level playing field for everybody. I have the feeling that, I mean, the players in the locker room definitely noticed. They're probably aware and wondering why and what is happening, essentially. Like, it's just a strange, puzzling move. I think they probably would have similar sentiments to us right now, in terms of what happened there. I do think, though, the main caveat is they're probably trying to do a load management type of strategy with Couturier right now. I think that's what makes the most sense to me, right? Like, if you look at his start to the year last season, he was playing over 20 minutes a night almost to start the season in the first, like, 15, 20, 30 games. I think they definitely do not want to replicate that. They want to make sure he's healthy for the full 82. So I understand them starting him off slowly. I just think fourth line left wing doesn't really utilize his talents best in terms of where he can really succeed on the ice. Like, Couturier is best on the ice in terms of his face-off ability, defensive acumen, behind the goal line in his own end, and then being able to, keep the other team out of the offensive zone and essentially drive play and keep the puck in the other opposition's end. And I really think him at center is probably the best way to bring that out. I feel like him as a winger is probably doing him a disservice at this point in his career. It makes sense, like, if you don't want to overload him and play him over 15 minutes a night, I get that. But I think at the very least, a third line center role for now into the foreseeable future is fine. And then if he really shows that he can take on more minutes, move him up. But I think having Couturier on the fourth line is just a puzzling decision to me so early in the season.
Yeah, and especially the team is struggling at 5-on-5. He is one of a handful of players who is an even plus minus. He's also 53.4% on the faceoff dot. Contrast that with Scott Lawton, who's 30.4, which is terrible.
And think about controlling the puck at 5-on-5. That's huge, right?
Yeah. So, they gave up on the Michkov Couturier thing so quickly, and I'm still a little confused by that. Like, I understand it to an extent, but like, Michkov at 5-on-5, it hasn't been great, but nobody has been great at 5-on-5, so I'm not gonna pick on Michkov. But a guy who is never a weakness at 5-on-5, especially defensively, Sean Couturier. I just feel like Tortorella has definitely been weird with Coots since he made him captain.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense, really.
Yeah.
Right? I don't really know how to explain it. Like, before the guy was captain, he was getting first line usage, playing great, obviously gets hurt, then gets the captaincy, and then it kind of falls off a cliff from there. I just think at this point he's deserved, better treatment, in the sense that he's shown for years at this point an ability to, be a consistent 5-on-5 player. At the very least, use him in a third line role for 5-10 games minimum and see what he can do. If he's really not meeting your expectations, then move him into that fourth line role. But to start him off in this way to begin the season, I just think it's very strange, in my opinion.
It's definitely been strange. And I don't think Coots has been bad. He's also
he hasn't been great or anything either. Like, I don't want to make it seem like, oh wow, he's been one of their best players. Like, what are they doing? He really hasn't created much offensively. But a lot of guys haven't on this team at this point, and he hasn't been terrible defensively. So when you look at it from that perspective, if you've been a team that's been significantly outscored at 5-on-5, just from the defensive standpoint, I think you want to have Couturier playing more because, like you said, he's not getting scored against when he's on the ice during 5-on-5 right now, while a lot of other players are. So
yeah, we'll dig in more when we get to the new lines, how that's going. So another guy that saw kind of a change in usage, and again, I don't know if this is really a fault of his in any way, but Jett Luchanko had his kind of minutes cut of late. For example, his first game he played 14 and a half minutes. Second game he played 17 minutes against Edmonton. Third game against Seattle, he played 12, 14, and then the other night against Vancouver in the home opener, he played 12, 23. So his minutes are going down. And you notice that when that game got really tense, one, Sean Couturier was being used more and was being used on the PK again. And then Jett Luchanko was being used less. I still love Jett Luchanko. I still believe in his high ceiling. Neither one of us were really in favor of keeping him here all season. I was open to a 9-game trial. I think you were even slightly less open than me to a 9-game trial. I was not open to keeping him here past 9 games. I said that earlier. I still stand by that. And as his usage now is being dropped, and it looks like he probably will not be playing the next game, and will probably play the game in Washington, not the one in Philly. But it does seem like the reality of playing a guy who just turned 18 in the NHL, who needed more time to cook, especially offensively. Like, he hasn't been bad. I'm not going to say he hasn't been bad in a single game. There is no time where I look at Jett Luchanko and be like, what is he doing out there? None. You know? But at the same time, we have to consider what is best for this very important prospect who now is past 2 games is playing 12 minutes a night. We want him playing 20 minutes a night, right? And building his offensive game. And this is what we've been saying. And we were kind of, we were in the minority as people were saying, well, what's the harm? Well, this is the harm. And again, if the guy is 20, okay, and he's dominated juniors, and he's kind of right in between, I'm like, all right, yeah, work him in slow. I'm fine with that too. But the fact that he didn't dominate juniors, that you just drafted him, that he's very young for his age group, all of these things tell me that, like, I don't think he's staying past this 9-game trial. I really don't. I think Torts was trying to fight for that. I think reality for Torts is kind of setting in a little bit, that he might be putting too much on this young man's plate. At such a young age. And he showed that in the game against Vancouver, where he does what he does and he grabs the people who are the most on and are the most impactful in the game, and he starts giving them more minutes. Like, even Michkov saw a slight reduction in minutes. He played almost 16 minutes, but he was playing like 18 minutes in the nights where he was playing better, right? And then you're seeing him now 2 games in a row with 12 minutes, and Sean Couturier's minutes went up, right? So it's like, the reality of it's kind of setting in. I don't think they're not going to do the 9-game trial. I think they will see that through, and they will give him 9 games. But I think there is a lot to say here that it will be a 9-game trial. He will go back to juniors, and he will continue his junior career there. And that, I would hope, was pitched to him from the very beginning. I don't think so, to be honest with you, just the way that Tortorella is talking publicly. And you look at little details like not telling Sean Couturier that he's going to be playing on the wing till right before the game, which maybe the decision was made right before the game too. That's absolutely possible. But I do believe that Briere and Jones they're already want to send Luchanko back. Like, I don't think that they were gung-ho about keeping him up here. I think, people's assumption that it was Tortorella, I think, is probably pretty accurate. And I think that they are, saw no downside of giving him 9 games, giving him a taste, and sending him back. But I think it is the right move to send Jett Luchanko back. And for example, like, Noah Cates needs to play too, and he's a good player. And you cannot tell me that right now Noah Cates is worse than Luchanko defensively. You cannot tell me that.
He's better than him defensively,
and maybe even offensively right now.
It's possible, yeah, definitely. I mean, you have to look at the offense. It hasn't really come for Luchanko whatsoever.
He hasn't scored a goal,
yeah,
even in preseason.
Exactly, right. And it's not just about goal scoring. There's other things that are important as well. But it's what we stated when we kind of, went into depth on this topic before the season began, that if he comes into this 9 games and doesn't produce it all offensively, and he really hasn't, there's no way you can justify keeping the kid. And you just have to think about it this way, right? If he's having trouble scoring now at the beginning of the season where the pace is at its slowest, it's only going to get harder as the season goes along. And he's really not going to be able to keep up, especially from an offensive standpoint, I don't think. I don't mean keep up in terms of like skating and speed, because he can definitely keep up there. I just mean in terms of the level of pace it takes to create offense at the NHL level as the season goes along. I don't know if he'll be able to keep up with that pace because right now, personally, he's having struggles creating offense, right? So what's going to happen down the line here? But yeah, like I don't think Luchanko's been bad by any means. Like
No.
he's had some missed coverages. There's been some details in his game that you've wanted to see corrected. Like this is a tweet from Alex Appleyard, and Appleyard kind of noticed that he's been on the ice for 3 even strength goals against now throughout the games that he's played. Obviously, that's not the greatest stat. There's some for him to learn defensively, even though he's still a really defensively responsible player for his age, but. I just think there's certain things that you could point to in his game, right, where he's missed some coverages, he hasn't produced offensively. If it was any other player, we'd be saying, yeah, send this person back, right? And obviously, it's the shiny new first round pick. Everybody wants to see them succeed, so I think it can be a hard topic to broach. But I do think that the right move for his development long term is to send him back. It'd be completely different, and I'd have a completely different mindset if he was, blowing us out of the water here, producing some points. Playing really well defensively, sure. No missed coverages. I would say, sure, keep him, right? And because it would look like this is the best thing for his development if he was doing those things. But the fact that he's not doing it, I think, points to he probably needs a little bit more seasoning in the OHL with Guelph. I just think, especially now that you're seeing his ice time being cut, is that what you really want him to be playing 11, 12 minutes a night? Going forward for the rest of the season? Is that the best way for him to develop? I just think he's not going to be playing in all situations, playing 12 minutes a night. The best thing for him is to go back to junior, play 20 minutes a night on Guelph, be their top line center, be on the first power play, first penalty kill, first line, being put out there when the team needs a goal, being put out there when the team needs to defend a lead. Like he won't be getting that usage on the Flyers here. So I just don't see the point in keeping him up past the 9 games. I think it's a good, measuring stick for Luchanko because he looked really strong in the preseason, and this is a great taste for him to kind of realize this is what it takes to play in the NHL. These are the things I need to work on. Let me go back to junior and do that, and I can really try to make the team out of camp next season. But just with how he's played so far, the ice time being reduced, the fact that he was the extra forward in practice today, I think, a lot of signs are pointing to the fact he's probably getting sent back after the 9 here.
And they benched him after he had a good game, too.
Exactly.
So it's not necessarily like him being benched is just because, like, again, it is important to remember the team is struggling at 5-on-5. So while everything you're saying is true, right? It's like you could say that about most of the guys in this lineup. So it's not like picking on Luchanko. But again, we're treating him differently because he is a prospect that entered the league before. Again, if he finished out this year and he was coming in at just turning 19 and he put up 100 plus points in juniors, I would be more open to this because I'd be like, how much? Yeah. What was he going to go in there? Put up?
But he's yet to dominate even the OHL at this point. So.
Right, at least in the way that you expect a player like dominate in the OHL is hitting 100 plus points, right? And he was near a point per game player. And he just had a coming out party, right? He is. I do believe there's something very special there with Luchanko, and I am not willing to risk that over just being a little faster, well, a lot faster down the middle, right? Like, yes, he's a phenomenal speed down the middle, but it's not just about speed. I know, I agree with Tortorella. It is important that your centermen are fast in today's game. That it is hard to disagree with, but it's not the only element that makes a centerman successful in the NHL either. And he's 18. I don't know. Neither one of us were really in favor of this. I was open to the 9-game trial after his preseason just because I love the way he looked defensively. But none of this seemed like a wise move. It seemed like an overzealous move. And I think the reality of that is kind of setting in. And if the Flyers are going through struggle periods, why have him struggle here? Why have him with here,
why
with us
subject
struggle
him
to that? Right.
Exactly. Why subject him to that? I just think with where the Flyers are situated right now, where they are in their timeline of where they want to be down the line, why would you make such a risk adverse move with such a, such a big piece of your future potentially, right? I just think there's so many things that could negatively impact him by keeping him up for the full 82 game season, especially when we have no idea, how this team's going to perform the rest of the way here. I just think there's a lot less risk to send him back to the OHL, and it's probably, a better thing for his development in the long run. So
Yeah. And again, he's had some scoring chances. I don't think he's been awful at all, actually. In
he
fact,
hasn't been awful, but I just think there's other areas of his game that still need work, and there's things that in the NHL, I don't know if he's going to get the time and space to really work on that.
Right. In game, yes. He's not. He isn't getting it. He has 3 shots on net in 4 games. Right. It's a little deceiving because I do think he had some scoring chances that probably didn't get to the net. But again, and he's almost 46% on the faceoffs, which is not bad at all for an 18-year-old. So, again, if they decide to keep him and they want to work through the entire season, fine. But I can't say that I think that that's the best course of action. It might prove to be irrelevant in the end. That is possible too. But I don't know why take the risk because the reward right now is not there. And it's showing in what's manifesting on the ice and now his ice time. And I think that's the coaches admitting that his speed cannot be the only thing setting him apart to be here. It has to be his overall play. And at a certain point, it's like you do risk hurting the kid's confidence, especially in the short term. And I'd rather have him coming into the NHL thinking he's the shit. And, you look at somebody like Couturier, who's 2 years older, probably 2 years plus older than Jett Luchanko, and he's struggling entering the NHL. Right. And I would agree that Luchanko has a more refined overall game, but Gautier's shot is ridiculous. He's got the offensive game and he's struggling. Right. So he's getting benched and whatnot. So it's like you're playing a development game here. You should play it safe. So I do think that his time will end at the end of the 9-game trial.
Yeah,
I think he'll be gone. He'll be gone by probably Mike, what is it? The beginning of November?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I would imagine that. And I think that's the best course of action. Could be wrong. I don't know what they're going to do, but I can tell you I wouldn't have even given him the 9-game trial if I was GM. I would have sent it back anyway. Even if he looked good and my coach wanted him, I'd be like, yeah, but this is what's right for the team. We have an action plan in paper, penciled in for the off season. We have money coming off the cap. We're going to have room. We can make, we can actually make some trades again. We can actually start doing stuff. And then you just slot Jett Luchanko right there into the top 9, right? Especially now that that's the positive of this is you get a good look at him. In your system with your coaches, you give him a plan to work on coming from the NHL coaches themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I've been saying.
There are positives.
That's what I've been saying all along, right? Like, give him a taste. He kind of understands what this team is trying to do on the ice, understands the systems, can go back and really, work on what he needs to improve on at the OHL level. But yeah, that's my perspective as well. I think you need to send him back. That's the best thing for his development here.
Yeah. So we'll see. He's still got a few more games here. Maybe if he explodes offensively in a couple games, that could change. Again, the team has kind of struggled, especially in the second half of the 5 games. So we'll see what happens. Kind of like since the Edmonton game and they blew that lead, it kind of felt like, they played so well against Seattle and then had that terrible period and then fought back. And then, there was another mistake there made. And I tweeted that it was York and it was actually Drysdale. And the team's just kind of working through stuff right now. I think people are blown out of proportion as to the caliber of the team, but they're clearly not as ready for the beginning of the season as they were last year, which is, I guess, the big difference between what we see this year and last year is there's actually more talent on this team, but the readiness is not there. So I did mention Drysdale. Let's talk about him. He's got a team low -7. He does have 1 goal. But his ice time has been going up, actually. A lot of people don't really, I don't think, see that. He started off 18 and a half minutes a game, then just under 19 minutes against Calgary. He had a team, very low, 13.54 against Edmonton, which is kind of weird. and didn't get as much ice time. Then the past 2 games, he's been playing 20. He played 20 minutes, 15 seconds against Seattle, and then 20 minutes and 50 seconds against Vancouver. I think his stats are a bit deceiving, to be honest with you. Like the -7, I think comes more from not producing and the team having difficult producing while he's on the ice. I don't think he's been like -7 bad. I actually like what I've seen from Jamie Drysdale, and I think he needs. And again, a guy also coming off of surgery, and the youngest defenseman on the team, right? So I do think that he's going to get better and better as the season goes on. He was -3 against Seattle, but he did score that important goal. I'd like to see him shoot more. That's my biggest criticism of him. He only has 4 shots in 5 games. He's definitely had opportunities to shoot where he hasn't, and he's opted towards a pass. I want to see him grab the bull by the horns and start shooting more. I could say the same thing about a lot of players on this team. But definitely for Drysdale, shoot more, and I'd like to see him play more of the rover role. I'm really interested to see what happens now that Sealer is back. He did develop some chemistry with Johnson, but Johnson's pretty slow foot right now. Sealer is a much better skater than Johnson at this point in his career. So I don't know. I'm not really down on Jamie Drysdale. I don't think it's been anywhere near as bad as the stats look, at least the -7 and only having 1 goal. But I think he's looked good on the power play. I think even though the Flyers weren't that successful on the power play last game, he did move. They were moving the puck really well. Actually, I think their first power play, if I remember correctly, it was their first power play, was moving the puck excellent. And they were in the offensive zone pretty much like 80% of the power play. This is what I want to see, and this is how I think Drysdale will build his game. And defensively, I don't think he's been bad. I think he's gotten better defensively as the season has gone on, to the point where I think he's now been competent. Again, the Vancouver game is kind of like a weird moment because they did, quite frankly, carry the second half of that game, but it was like kind of a little too late, and puck luck was not on their side either. But I think that Drysdale, like Farabee a little bit too, and like Tippett, is kind of on the precipice of turning that around. Maybe you don't agree with me, Vasili, but like that's how I kind of see it. I'm like, I think he's like 1 or 2 games away from kind of hitting his stride here. Maybe I'm being overexcited about it, but I think that there's going to be a turnaround here for Drysdale offensively pretty soon.
I've liked what I've seen from Drysdale. I think there's been some, defensive shortcomings, a couple of missed coverages. Like, for example, that Seattle game, it's 5-4. York and him are obviously put together as a kind of makeshift pairing. They don't play together very often. York pinches on his side of the ice. Drysdale also pinches. Drysdale misses the pinch. York doesn't realize he's pinching, and then that essentially allows the breakaway as they both are pinching.
Yeah.
I think though, yeah, it's a really tough play. It's a really, really tough play. The team's trying to push the envelope because they're down a goal. Yeah. You have so much time at that point, you don't really need to make that pinch. But I also have to question, like, you're putting that makeshift pairing out there at that time. If it's York and Sanheim, does the same thing happen? Because usually York's the guy who pinches on that pairing. Sanheim comes back. I think it's a familiarity thing more than like Drysdale made a huge mistake, because typically if Drysdale's on a pairing, he's going to be that offensive pinch first guy, and his partner is going to be the guy that drops back, where York is usually that guy on his pairing, right? In some of a sense. But yeah, like I think for Drysdale, Sealer coming back is really going to help him, to be honest. I think Johnson's been a fine partner for him, but I don't know if Johnson has kind of opened him up and allowed him to be as free as he should be offensively at this point. Like, I think, not to say that Johnson's been, bad defensively, but there's been some shortcomings on his end too. I think Sealer's more of a, better fit as a partner for a guy like Drysdale right now, where you can kind of really open him up and he can really play that rover position for you and really rush up the ice.
Because Sealer can get back.
Exactly, right? Well. Yeah, exactly. And it allows you to utilize the skating ability of Drysdale to kind of act like that extra forward, open up chances on odd man rushes and transition, stuff like that, which the Flyers have honestly haven't been great to start the season. Their transition play's been A bit of a disappointment when you kind of look at how good it was last season. But just back to Drysdale in general, I don't think he's been bad. I do think the power plays looked a lot better, and he's been a big part of that, right? So his just ability to kind of walk the blue line with his lateral skating, that one, wrist shot goal that he had, I do want to see him utilize that shot more because I think with the way he skates and the way he can walk that line, he can kind of use it deceptively and kind of release a wrist shot while he's skating, kind of catch a goalie off guard with the screen in front. So I do think Drysdale's going to continue to improve here, but in terms of his defensive play, like there's been some shortcomings, but there's still a lot to learn for him. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think there's going to be consistent improvement with him probably as we go on throughout the season here.
I defensively, look, it's hard to disagree that he hasn't been great defensively, but I will say some of his passes out of the zone I think have been better than most players on the team.
He's been their best outlet passer for me.
Right.
I think a lot of their passing out of the defensive zone has been sloppy,
bad,
not on the tape.
Yes,
and it's really kept them hemmed in their own zone far longer than they should be, and that's a huge part into why they've been so bad 5-on-5.
Yeah,
we can kind of get into all the 5-on-5 stuff.
Yeah,
now.
let's get into it. So yeah, we wanted to talk specifically about 5-on-5, and I believe you have a bunch of statistics that you want to throw our way that are in your article. So again, make sure to check out Vasili's article. What was the title of it again? I forget.
5 observations after the first 5 games for the Flyers. So yeah, check that out on flyersnittygritty.com. There's a ton of content in there, a ton of interesting stuff that I tried to capture from the first 5 games. And I'm going to be doing a consistent article series. So essentially, once it hits the 10-game interval, I'll do another article with 5 observations. Once it hits the 15 game, another article, and then 20 games, another article, and so on. So it'll be a bit of a series here.
Love it.
But yeah, so just to go into 5-on-5 play, like first of all, the Flyers really have been struggling sustaining offensive zone pressure and puck possession in general, right? Like there's been a lot of times where they've been hemmed in their own end, haven't really been able to break the puck out of the defensive zone. And a lot of that has been due to, their disjointed, sloppy passing. Like they've had, on numerous occasions, I can't count how many times where I've seen them try to exit, the zone and try to do so with the stretch pass. And the stretch pass either was off the mark, intercepted, was not connecting. And then by the time they do eventually break the puck up the ice, the line, that's on the ice has to change. And then you're not able to really sustain any sort of pressure. But just in terms of, total scoring chances, high danger scoring chances, create a 5-on-5 this season, the Flyers have been outchanced significantly in both metrics, unfortunately. So in total, the Flyers have created 91 scoring chances at 5-on-5 and 30 high danger scoring chances, and that's through the first 5 games, while they've given up 108 scoring chances and 44 high danger scoring chances. So they've been, outchanced significantly in terms of just general scoring chances and high danger scoring chances. I think that speaks to a lot of, their struggles at 5-on-5, right? They haven't really sustained a lot of pressure. They haven't really been able to, move the puck up the ice effectively and kind of get that transition game going. They're one of the best teams off the rush and in transition last season, but we haven't seen as many really odd man rushes. And I think that's a lot of that is attributed to their inability to kind of move the puck up the ice effectively. And that bleeds into the scoring chances, right? A lot of high danger chances you're going to create off the rush. The Flyers have, been outchanced in terms of high danger scoring, 44-30. There's a reason for that, and really it's because they haven't controlled the puck enough at 5-on-5. What do you think about that? You're even, we can kind of get into more stats as well.
I mean, I think it's kind of obvious from the eye test a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know, dude. It's still such a small sample size, and I look at the type of road trip that they went on, and it's been such a roller coaster of a road trip too, where you can't say that they really played horribly. Even in the game they lost against Calgary, they kind of had these segments where things got away from them, and they also haven't had the most puck luck, especially lately. I will say, especially the game against Vancouver, I thought that was a big puck luck game. That was one of those games where it's just not going right. And
a couple posts. Also, that Eric Johnson wide open net, he's probably putting that in 4 to 5 times.
So, like, while I do take those stats seriously, it's an indication of where the team is or what they've done. Let's put it that way. Not what they are, but what they've done in the past. You know, I think all of this is workable. I think, when you do your next segments and 10 games through, 15 games through, I think we'll probably see these numbers balance out better, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I do want to mention, right, like we mentioned it before as well. They've been outscored 16-6 and 5-on-5. I think what it really shows is that they just need to try to get to those high danger areas more. I think
Yeah.
they've been far, too many shifts where they are either on the perimeter or, like I said, they just cannot break the puck into the offensive zone cleanly, and it kind of kills plays and
It's
then
killing them.
allows the other team to get the puck and kind of regroup and then go back on the attack. So I just think the Flyers really need to, in order to improve this stuff at 5-on-5, is really just try to get into those high danger areas. It sounds simple, but I mean, what they really need to do is, firstly, cleaner entries into the offensive zone. That's a main thing. Try to get more of that offensive transition offense on the go, pretty much. And then also, I think plays kind of around the net, around the slot. You're having a little bit of trouble scoring. Maybe that extra pass isn't worth it. Take the shot, try to get a greasy rebound goal, try to get, cause some havoc in front. And that's kind of how you get the momentum going to turn it around, right?
Yeah, no, I also think like last season they were a lot more opportunistic in the beginning of the year, right? Like they weren't necessarily still dominating at 5-on-5 or anything like that, but they would take the puck the other way and they would bury an opportunity. Right now they're not really getting that, right? Their entries haven't been as good, especially off the rush. So they have kind of been missing those chances of late. And, that's not because like Forrester hasn't been opportunistic. He hasn't been opportunistic in general at the start of last year either, right? So he wasn't scoring early. So it's, a lot of the like Travis Konechny goals, like he had a couple of them, but he hasn't scored on the rush. And, Tippett hasn't scored on the rush. Frost hasn't scored on the rush. It's like Farabee, who also has been
Most of
known.
your offense has not been scoring on the rush,
Right.
unfortunately.
And that's where I think that big differential is coming from is, last year they're trying, maybe they have like some kind of change that they've been like playing or a mindset change in the way they've been playing and a little bit of a systems change. But last year was a lot of it just limit opportunities and catch the opponent. That's how they kind of started their season. I don't think they've done a good job doing that, limiting the opportunities coming
Definitely
their
not.
way and then being opportunistic. They're kind of just trying to play the other team's game, against them. And I think they need to revert more of just being that scrappy team that getting a shot on net against us is a pain in the ass. That's what they
Yeah.
need to be. Is we are in your way every single time, and then when you get frustrated, we will catch you and we will score. It is not the way the best teams in the league play, but it is the way the teams that just get in the playoffs that can't beat you on talent. That's how they need to play to be successful. And the Flyers right now can't beat you on pure talent. Most of the talent on this team is not purely developed. The most talented player on the team is 19 years old, right? So it's like you need to kind of work your way into being a more talented team than other teams in general. You don't necessarily have the names on paper where you can cycle a team for, majority of the game and then kind of beat them. You have to play a little differently. And I think they've moved away from that a little bit. And I think that's why Tortorella really wanted Luchanko in the lineup because he saw that speed and saw the opportunity to do that. Right. And it's why Ryan Poehling is such a favorite of Tortorella as well because of his speed. But that doesn't fly when you're not playing that way either. Which again, maybe that's why Luchanko hasn't been as successful because the team hasn't been as good on the rush.
Yeah, and I think to your point, like shot suppression has really regressed in the first 5 games compared
Really,
to last
oh, it's been
season.
driving me nuts.
I just think in general, like the Flyers were a lot more successful killing plays in terms of like one and dones last season, winning puck battles. This season they've struggled a lot more. There's obviously a bit of a change on the defense in a sense. So I think missing Sealer in that effect in terms of shot suppression, that's a really big loss, right? Because just think about how many shots he blocks. Even if he doesn't block a shot, getting in the lane, what does that do to kind of mess with the opposition shooter and kind of potentially take them, off the actual shot they're trying to make and the accuracy associated. So I think getting Sealer back can help with the shot suppression, but I do have some stats. So last season, the Flyers were second in the NHL in shots against per game. They allowed on average 27.13 shots per game. The only team that allowed less was Carolina.
Right.
Comparatively, this season, the Flyers are 21st in the same shots against per game metric. And right now they're allowing 30 shots per game on average. So it's only like a 3 more shot, differential in terms of last season to this season, but that can be huge, right? Because those 3 shots could be high danger scoring chances that end up in the back of your net.
There's the 9 goal difference between
pretty much,
if anything,
pretty much from game to game, right? So it's possible, but I do think that's something they need to get back to because that was one of their biggest strong points, like blocking shots, being able to kill plays quickly in the defensive zone and kind of turning it around quickly into a transition offensive play, which we've seen a lot less of. So I just think that's going to be something that they stress, right? I think it's a no-brainer that the coaching staff realizes this. So they're going to probably try to work on things in practice as they did today, as they practiced before, the games in Washington, and hopefully get back into that structure that was so successful in shots suppression last season.
Yeah, and the worst part about it, dude, is that if they had the power play running the way that it was running right now, when they were really good at shot suppression, they would have been more successful. And now that their power play is not embarrassing, right? Their shot suppression has gone down. It's like, but that's the way you can catch teams now, is get really good at the shot suppression again, suffocate teams, and then beat them on the power play. And that'll give you that extra goal a game that you need.
It's a great strategy.
Right, to win the game. So you have it on paper now to do it. I am not overreacting because of 5 games. The 5 games
only
hurt.
5, yeah.
Right, but it's small, 5 games. Right. It's like, it is not an indication of where this team is. I mean, last I checked, Nashville didn't have, I don't know if they won a game yet in regulation. They're not that bad, they haven't lost a game in regular or in overtime even last time.
Like I said, right? Like to your point, Nashville still hasn't won a game. They're 0-5-0. Is Nashville like a terrible team? Like they're probably still going to make the playoffs, right? So it's only 5 games. We got to take it with a grain of salt. But we just wanted to bring these stats up because it's interesting in terms of the comparisons from last season, obviously.
Yeah. There's a good amount of good teams struggling right now, too.
No, there is. And there's a couple other stats I just want to mention off the top. Like, I don't have too much to go with it, but I just thought they were interesting. So shout out to Jay Fresh. They put out, a ton of great metrics online all the time. So if you're not following Jay Fresh on Twitter, give him a follow. But yeah, so I have a couple stats from him. So in terms of goal differential above expected, the Flyers are 29th in the league right now with a minus 8.8. So just based on their play, they should be getting a lot more luck, a lot more goals scored. But right now, they're kind of a negative goal differential above expected. So what that shows is that they deserve a better fate, ultimately, right? That they in certain cases, they've been playing okay, but just a lot of things haven't been going their way on the ice, and that's kind of how you get that negative 8.8 goals differential above expected metric. And I have a few more other ones here as well. So 5-on-5 expected goals for per 60. The Flyers are 23rd in the league at 2.31. That kind of leads into what we've been talking about earlier, right? Like their offensive play hasn't been the sharpest right now. A lot of that's been due to execution, a lot of sloppy passing, stretch passes not connecting. That all plays into why the offense really hasn't been clicking at this point, but it's still early, so there's definitely a chance to rebound and turn things around going forward. And then another one I wanted to mention was 5-on-5 expected goals against per 60. In terms of expected goals against, they're 20th in the league at 2.54. So they're faring a lot better defensively so far than they have been offensively, which, makes a lot of sense. If you just look at the games, I think they have been stronger, defensively than their offensive game at this point, but there's struggles on both ends, right? I think you could look at the way the Flyers have played, and this is probably, I would equate this to being a bad stretch. Like they're starting off, on essentially not an unlucky streak, but they're starting off cold to begin the season here. But there's always a chance to rebound. I think you made a great point. Like if this was something that happened, 20 games into the season, it would probably be way less blown out of proportion. But the fact that this is to start the season and there's so much hype, surrounding the Flyers heading into this regular season. I think that's why a lot of people are kind of looking at these 5 games and really panicking to begin, right?
And honestly, I don't know why people are panicking. And did have one tweet that did really well, and I said it, like if the team does well and the young guys take a step, we get to enjoy playoff hockey or great hockey all year. If they don't and the team is mediocre, we have 6 picks inside the top two.
You're prepared in both ways, but like,
well, Briere bought insurance on the season.
Yeah, exactly. There's 2 positives, right? Your young guys take a step forward if things go right. If not, you might have to reevaluate some of these young guys, and if you think they're going to be a part of the future going ahead potentially. But then you have to look to the draft side of it and say, hey, like the team's well prepared to capitalize in the draft on a poor season if it happens to go that way.
Right, so. Exactly. This is a rebuilding year. And I feel like people walked away from that so quickly because of an addition of a 19-year-old and an 18-year-old onto the team. And that
it's just excitement. Me. It's excitement, really, right? Yeah. I think people are just excited about, having Matvei Michkov on the Flyers, about seeing a guy like Jett Luchanko that looks like he has elite, speed, but you have to understand that even though there's, dynamic elements to these players' games, they're not going to be able to, drag this team into contention right off the bat. It's going to take some time. There's going to still be a learning curve. There's still going to be, a development process here, and there's still going to be pieces to be added, right? This, I don't think this team where it's at right now is really at the position to say, oh, like you're not going to make that free agent splash. You're not going to make significant additions if the opportunity arises, right?
Right. No, they're definitely out there. That was my whole point about the Luchanko thing. It's like, this is why you want that extra year of the ELC. It's not the end of the world if you don't get it. Don't get me wrong. If the kid deserves to be here, you keep him. But there is clearly a plan here that they're working on. And there's some older players here that probably will not be here at the time that this team is really ready to compete in the playoffs. I'm not talking about just getting in. I'm talking about being a team that is an obvious playoff team from the very beginning of the season. That's what we're building towards here. And the fact that the Flyers have reverted systematically and have not come out and played towards the system as well as they did last year shows that it's an up and down, and everything is an EKG meter. And if you look at a guy like Tyson Forrester, it's hard for me to say he's really struggling, but he definitely struggled a little bit so far because he did start off well and then kind of struggled the past couple games. But he's a second-year player. He is likely to have a sophomore slump. 90% of players have a sophomore slump. The odds of that are really high. Development is an up and down curve. So, like, even when we come into this season struggling, the Flyers might lose, the narrative there on their system between then. That's the whole point of being a great team, is that a team just picks up where they last left off, like a team like Florida, who won a cup, and they know what it takes as a group, and they're just continuing what they did last season, right? Like, this is what we really want to get to. And even when you see a team like Calgary who's having a lot of success right now, I promise you they will not finish at the top of the Pacific Division. They went 4-0. They just lost in overtime, and I expect more of their weaknesses will show as they come along because they're better than people expected, but they're still not a great team. And I promise you, Edmonton will catch them because they're a better team than Calgary, right? So it's like you need time for all of these things to pan out, and it's going to be an up and down ride until we even get to the end of the season in general. There were ups and downs last season too.
Yeah, there's going to be intervals of success and the opposite of that. And I think right now the Flyers are having a bad stretch, but that doesn't mean the next 5 games aren't going to be positive, really. So,
having said that, they have a pretty tough opponent in the Washington Capitals, who started off well, and they have a back-to-back against them. So we'll see. Hopefully they can at least split that series. If they win both
3
games,
or 4 points
it'd be awesome.
Ideal, I would say.
Yeah. Well, ideal would be 2 wins, but maybe that's not realistic. All right, so let's get into the new lines. This was reported by Jordan Hall. We'll give him credit. I believe Charlie O'Connor is off right now, so he didn't report those lines, but Jordan's on top of it pretty much every time. So the new lines as we see it, Forrester, Frost, and Konechny are the top line. The second line is Tippett, Paling, and Michkov. The third line is Farabee, Couturier, and Brink. Fourth line right now, Delorier, Cates, and Hathaway, and Luchanko is the extra. Scott Lawton is unavailable right now as his wife apparently is in labor or due to have their kid, so he might miss one of those games, might miss both. So as of right now, Luchanko sits on the outside. Delorier, assuming Scott Lawton can't go, will probably get his first game of the season on Tuesday. When you're listening to this, when most of you are listening to this, the most interesting part about it probably is the Frost, Konechny, and Forrester combination as a top line. And then the one that sticks out to you the most is Ryan Poehling playing between Tippett and Michkov. And I will say, on the surface, I do not like that line at all. The D is the same. I didn't mention that, but the D is exactly the same. Outside of Nick Seeler will be playing, and we mentioned this already, in place of Johnson, who's now the extra, and Seeler will be playing with Drysdale. But man, that Tippett Poehling Michkov line, one, I already don't know if Michkov and Tippett work that well. We'll see. I thought Frost and Michkov have better chemistry, and Konechny and Michkov have better chemistry. But this is the lines they opted to go with. Now, on the surface, Ryan Poehling is not terrible. I am not freaking out because he's playing in the middle, right? He does have the speed to keep up with Tippett, which is cool. Michkov is not a burner quite yet. I think he will get faster as his career develops. I expect his pace to pick up as he turns more into a man and adds more strength and gets in better shape and all that as he moves forward. I don't know. I look at this line. It could work, but when I look at it, I go, this is completely temporary. And I'm not a big fan of completely temporary lines. That might not be the case in Tortorella's mind, but I have yet to be wrong about this when I've called out a temporary line. And this one screams temporary line to me.
Yeah, that line specifically, like, I don't know if that's going to even last a full game next game. It seems like one where they might, switch it up pretty quick. Who knows? But looking at it from the surface level, like Forrester, Frost, Konechny, I like that. Frost and Konechny have shown, good chemistry before. You add Forrester in there, that's kind of the guy that's going to win all your board battles. And that he can really be the trigger man too on that line. Konechny is a great playmaker as well. So I do like that. And Konechny shown, like I said, chemistry with Frost in the past and chemistry with Forrester. So why not try the combination? Because, I mean, they've had Michkov and Frost together for a handful of games. They haven't looked great together at 5-on-5. They do seem to have more chemistry on the power play with more time and space. So I don't mind, switching that up because, like I said, the results haven't been there. So you have to make some sort of change. You can't just go with the status quo here. Yeah. So I understand it. In terms of Poehling Michkov, I actually, it's not the ideal center for Michkov. I actually don't mind Poehling because of the speed. To be honest, I don't like Michkov and Tippett more than I don't like Poehling and Michkov.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I just think Michkov, you want him to have the puck as much as possible when he's out there. Get the puck in his hands. Tippett's a guy that also needs the puck a lot to create scoring opportunities. I think you're doing them both a disservice playing them together. They just haven't seemed to show a lot of offensive chemistry with one another, so I don't know why they're kind of stapled to the opposite wings at this moment. I think maybe maybe the ideal is you have Michkov such a great, playmaker. Tippett has a great shot. You want Michkov to feed Tippett for a bunch of goals, right? Maybe that's what they're looking for. I just think, though, that Tippett tries to create so much on his own off the rush in transition using his speed. I don't know if it's the best combination to bring that offense out of Michkov. So that's personally what I would do and what I think they should do is I would actually switch Farabee and Tippett. And I would put Farabee, Poehling, and Michkov together and put Tippett with Couturier and Brink. And Brink and Tippett have had some chemistry in the past. That's what I would like to see. Other than that, though, I don't really mind the lines. I just think that's the big kind of outlier for me here, where Michkov and Tippett, I just don't think the skill sets mesh well. I think they're too similar, actually, in terms of how they create offense. They both really need the puck on their stick, so you got to split them up. And to be honest, if they kept that second line together, I do really like the third line. I think that's, to be honest, might actually be not a first line, but could be a 1C type of line, where none of these scream like this is the top line to me. I guess maybe the one with Frost Konechny, you could say that. But even if you play Couturier, Farabee, Brink as top line minutes over Forster, Frost, Konechny, I wouldn't really have an issue with it at this point.
So based off of what they have, I agree with what you said. But like if I could rejuggle these, like if I had any say, I like what you put out there. I'd be open to that too. I think what I would go with is Tippett, Frost, Konechny, and then I would do Farabee, Coots, Michkov.
That
And
was
then
my
I would
other
do,
thought
yeah,
too, instead of
Forrester,
Paling.
Paling, and Brink, and put Paling as third line center. I don't I don't see Paling's offensive ceiling, even in his best offensive year, being as good as Coots's. And we saw that
In
last year.
his worst offensive
Right.
year. That's
So
my thoughts too, but I mean, he like Tortorella loves the speed of Paling, so I think that's what gives him the
well,
edge.
I also don't think Michkov needs to necessarily play a speed game to be successful. I think he just needs to have the puck on his
Yeah, he
stick.
can slow it down. I think his skill set primarily is one of those that if you give him the puck, he can deliberately slow it down to look for a play in
Right.
that manner if you need to. And that's why I don't see the detriment of him playing with Couturier because I think they're both smart and
Right.
they both
That's
know when to slow it down and look for that type of opportunity when the situation calls for it pretty
Yeah,
much.
and I would like them to try to revisit that. Again, I'm open to this. Whatever, I want to win. So hopefully he's right and we're wrong. I always hope that the coach knows more than I do, and a lot of times he does. But
Yeah,
I don't
definitely.
love these lines. They still look incredibly temporary. I don't expect them to stay very long. To be
Of
honest
any
with
of
you.
these lines, that stick, my prediction is maybe the first one, Forrester, Frost, Konechny. I think maybe they'll find some chemistry. The two middle lines, I don't know. I continually see a situation where we're a couple of games down the line, those middle lines continue to be juggled.
Yeah,
I just think, like, I don't know, like you said, right? That's a great point. Like, is Paling really suited to be in your top six? Probably not, right?
no.
Like, or it probably shouldn't
it
be
it
anyways.
it would be temporary at the most. Where again, like I know Torts doesn't have the history with Couturier that we do, and I understand Couturier's injury history and all that, but that would be one of my top priorities as coach is getting Coots going. And I don't like I feel like he was trying to do that with Luchanko. Maybe he's trying to do that with Coots. I don't know exactly, but it doesn't seem like he thinks that he can. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, yeah, but if you do get Coots going, your entire team
That's a
changes.
huge asset. Yeah.
Yeah, so like you really need to get him going. So like we'll see how things develop. Again, it's up to Couturier to do more on the ice too, and I think you stated that well earlier. It's not like he's been playing amazing, right? It's like a no brainer, and it's like, hey, what are you doing? But I would like to see. He did play Tippett with Couturier at times too, so I'm interested to see. But Tippett's so fast that I'm like, you like the Paling Tippett actually makes more sense to me. That's why I was
Yeah.
like, just put Tippett with Frost and Konechny. They're all fast. Let them just rush the shit out of everybody. Put Forrester. I'm really interested to see Forrester with Brink. They both like kind of came in together. Sometimes that works. I don't know if it will, but I'd be interested. And then I know Paling can play a third line center role, and then try Coots with Farabee and Michkov. And again, Michkov is just an upgraded version of Brink, right? Brink does kind of what Michkov does, just not as good of a shooter,
Yeah.
not as good of a passer, not as
And
good, kind
I
of
mean,
everything. But
and Couturier and Fairby have had chemistry for years at this point. Like that top line during the COVID year was what Couturier, Fairby, JVR. I mean, was really good a long
no, that's
time
good.
ago.
Yeah, that's a
So
good point.
we'll see. I mean, what happens, but yeah, I wouldn't expect these lines to stick for a prolonged period of time. I mean, we could be totally wrong, and they could go on a 5-game winning streak with these lines. That'd be amazing.
Yeah,
But
I'd
we'll
love to be
see.
proven wrong.
We'll see what happens, I guess, in the
Yeah,
next couple days, couple games here.
yeah. I don't expect many changes in the D at all upcoming right now. Though if that happens, I think we have like an idea of how things would play out. But as of right now, I don't expect the D to change. I don't expect York and Sanheim to be split up. I don't expect Drysdale to be playing with anybody but Sealer, potentially Zamula. But again, while people have been kind of riding Zamula hard, about his play. The coaching staff necessarily has not.
He
He's
hasn't
still
looked bad to me. I mean, there's been some
he's made some glaring
points.
mistakes.
Yeah, there's been some points where he's missed a coverage or has had a giveaway, but I just think if you look at his play last season to this season, he's definitely improved.
I think so too.
I think there's just a less of a hesitancy. He doesn't seem as I want to say overwhelmed, but that might be the word. I think maybe
Yeah.
last season to start, he was a little bit overwhelmed. I think this season he kind of settled into what he knows his role to be. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't expect the defense to change much unless they really continue to bleed, chances and goals against in the
Yeah.
next few games here.
Yeah. And there are options there to try, but I think they also want like Zamula with Risto, and they want Sealer with Drysdale, and they want York with Sanheim. The only other option there is to really separate York and Sanheim and then try to split stuff up. But you want to have a true top pairing too.
And that's their closest thing to it at this
right,
point, really.
exactly. They could try to develop York and Drysdale, but I think that's kind of up to Drysdale a little bit. Like if Drysdale breaks out, we could potentially see something like that. You know what I mean? And they could do like Sealer and Sanheim.
I think that'd be like
or Zamula and
maybe,
Sanheim or something.
yeah, I think that'd be like a little bit maybe into the season. I think they want to really see how he can improve with with the Sealer as his partner before they start to make any like huge adjustments, right?
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's probably we're gonna see the most consistencies in the D pairings. And then Ersson is slated to start next game. I suspect he might play both. Probably not the best idea. You did mention to me that that it looked that the next goalie has not been named for the back-to-back game. I can absolutely see that Tortorella is hesitant to play Fedotov again.
Yeah, so I mean, Tortorella confirmed Ersson will start in net like today against the Caps when everybody's listening to this, but there isn't anything set in terms of the goalie for Wednesday. They haven't made a decision yet, which is strange on a back-to-back. So I mean, read into that what you will. Personally, I think they should give the game to Fedotov because at this point, you have to see what he has, and I mean, just let him get out there and try to rebound. If it's terrible, it's terrible, but at least you know that you need to call Kolosov up after something like that. But
here's the. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Well, I was going to say the reason I think he would probably do that is because they have a 2-day break now. Yeah. Then they have back-to-backs and then another 2-day break, and then back-to-backs again. So I think Fedotov will play one of these 3 games.
Which makes sense, yeah.
Whether it be the game against Washington on Wednesday or the game on Sunday against Montreal. But I would not be surprised if he plays Ersson 3 games in a row.
Yeah, I mean, Ersson's been their best player. I kind of mentioned that in my article.
It's hard to deny.
For the 5 observations, I was one of them that, Ersson's been very sharp. He's been their most consistent player. He deserved a way better fate in that Vancouver game on Saturday. He kept them in it at points. If it wasn't for him, it could have been, the score could have been run up even considerably more than it was. So he's been their best player, so I don't mind them to play him, in the back-to-back here, but they got to be careful. It's early in the season. You really don't want to start over-relying on him too early here and kind of falling into those same patterns that kind of derailed his game last season. So they got to be careful, especially if they're going to start trying to, get him into like back-to-back situations this early. Personally, I wouldn't do it. I think play Fedotov, see what happens. I think one thing to mention that people are really forgetting, that I tried to point out in my article as well, is Ersson really struggled too last season to begin his NHL career, right? Like, I think, let me see here, what was it exactly? But I have the stats. So for 2 games, right, Ivan Fedotov has an .818 save percentage and a 6.09 goals against average. That's very ugly stats, obviously, not good at all, especially the goals against average. But we have to remember, in the first 3 starts last season, Ersson had an 800 save percentage, a 720 save percentage, and a 778 save percentage in his first 3 games to start. So people weren't, people were going crazy saying he was terrible online after those 3 starts last season and hoping he got sent down. I mean, what else would you expect from Flyers Twitter? But, that's not the way to react because we saw how Urson rebounded after that, right? The NHL's a tough league. It can be very tough to acclimate, especially to start your career. I think it's a little too early to panic after 2 games, as I said. Personally, I think Fedotov's leash should be like a 10 games, in my opinion, right? Like he's played 2 games already. Give him some time, give him some leash here. See what he can do. If after the 10 games he's still this bad, then you can do the swap with Kolosov. But I mean, you have to factor in like it's not like they have a reliable third goalie you could really plug in here. Like as much as people want to say Alexei Kolosov is better than him, he hasn't
There's
been the
no
greatest.
evidence of that right now.
Yeah, he hasn't been the greatest with the Phantoms, right? Like he let 4 goals in. What was it, the last game or one of the last couple of games, and then he shut the door after that completely. But he still let 4 goals in to begin, right? So, I think you're in a similar situation with either of these goalies. They both play in the KHL. They're both kind of acclimating themselves to the North American game. How to kind of track the puck in the NHL ice rinks, how to kind of cut down the angles appropriately, how to play certain situations that might have been played differently by certain players in the KHL versus the NHL. So I think you're in a real similar situation with both. So I think at this point it makes more sense to kind of lean with the veteran and Fedotov versus the younger goaltender in Kolosov, in my opinion.
Yeah,
But
Urson, you have less invested in Fedotov.
Yeah, exactly. But Urson, though, I mean, has been everything you could ask for and more from your starter to begin here, in terms of the goaltending.
Yeah, I think he's looked really sharp. He is who we thought he is. But they got to play better in front of him. That's really what it comes down to.
Dry,
same with Fedotov.
Yeah,
and Fedotov just gave up those 2 absolutely routine save goals, and that's what killed me. It's not necessarily
Seattle,
yeah, that was really bad. That reminded me of Peterson that game, and that's why I was kind of like, oof, I knew he was getting pulled.
Well, do you notice this with him? Is that both those goals that were 5-hole, right? I noticed that there's screens in front. He's trying to look over top of the screen versus
I saw
it. And that's kind of, in my opinion, what's making him let the goals in 5-hole, because he's kind of looking over above somebody. And then by the time you realize the shot's coming, oh shit, you have to get into your butterfly really quickly, and he can't do it quick enough. And then the goals go right through him. So I'm sure if we're noticing that, Kim Dillabaugh and the goaltending coaches are probably 100%. Making that adjustment. Now we just have to see kind of how he takes it. But like I said, 2 games for me, especially with the way goaltending is at the NHL level, for a guy that's never played in the NHL ever before, I mean, I'm not going to panic. I think he deserves more of a shot, more of an opportunity.
Absolutely.
And I think there is talent there and there is skill there. There's a couple things to note with Fedotov that people don't mention is despite him letting in some really bad goals, he's made some really big saves as well in both games. And that to me shows that there is something that he's doing where, okay, the size can be an asset. Like the way he plays can be an asset. He can be successful, but there's certain elements he needs to adjust and change. And you have to hope that the goaltending coaches can point that out and he can really work towards those changes and adjustments. But I do think, like I said, he's at least going to get, 4 or 5 more games at the minimum to kind of see if he can rebound and kind of provide some, at least league average backup goaltending. But if the 6 goals against average statistic continues going forward, obviously they're going to have to make a switch. It's just the nature of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he definitely deserves more than just 2 games. I just know how fickle Tortorella is with goaltending, and understandably so. And he was like that with Sandstrom and with Peterson. So he really needs you to, he could have given up one of those goals, but he gave up 2 of them in the same game. And one of them...
Backbreakers, both of them.
Exactly. They were backbreaking, too, and they were routine saves. So he just can't have those. It's not so much that his numbers are terrible, it's that those 2 goals are just and I think he had one against Calgary, too, where it's
5-hole.
Yeah, that needs to be saved. That is a routine shot.
They always say it, right? 5-hole goal is the worst goal to allow as a goaltender, especially in the
modern day. Yeah,
especially the age of the butterfly goaltender. You should not be letting that in. But we'll see where it goes with Fedotov. I do think, like I said, that there is an ability for him to rebound here. I'm not counting him out, so I'm really interested to see kind of how he progresses. Like I said, I think it is important to note that it's really only been a handful of games here at the NHL level. So I do think it's very, very early to supplant him, as somebody that can't be a backup so far. Like I think we need to hold our horses on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very easy to judge a player, but again, I always also look like, is he the only person playing poorly or making mistakes? No.
Yeah.
So if he's the only one, that's a different story. It's a lot easier to pinpoint what's wrong, but the reality is the team hasn't played that well in front of
Yeah,
him either.
like
So
to factor in, to jump off that, Yariv, like he led in those two terrible 5-hole goals against Seattle, but in the second period there was breakdowns by the defense
right,
that allowed odd man rush opportunities that he had no chance on. So it goes both ways, right?
yeah, yeah. All right, real quick. I just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications to get updates and notified on when new episodes come out on this YouTube channel. And also follow us on Spotify and iTunes and give us a rating there as well if you can for the audio version. All right, let's do a quick Phantoms update. So, Vasili, I don't think you got a chance to watch any of this. I was watching along. The Phantoms played at the exact same time as the Flyers against the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. They also lost 3-0. Kolosov was in net for that. The third goal was an empty netter, so Kolosov only gave up 2 goals in that game. The crazy thing about that game is Wilkes-Barre Scranton had 10 shots in the first, 3 in the second, and 4 in the third. The Phantoms had 10 shots in the first, 19 shots in the second, and 12 in the third. They had
So they outshot them considerably, yeah.
41 to 17. They could not score. I don't think the first goal that Emil Bemstrom scored on Kolosov was in a 2-on-0. So again, not Kolosov's fault. I missed the second goal that Wilkes-Barre Scranton scored, so I can't tell you exactly. But the first one, if you would have saved that, it would have been ridiculous. It was a 2-on-0, and it was a pass across the crease.
He
He
left your
slid across.
goaltender out to dry at that
Yeah,
point.
he slid across, and he almost saved it, too. So I do think overall, Kolosov had a pretty good game, considering he only saw 17 shots in that game. And the first goal that he gave up in the first period was, almost unsavable. Maybe the second goal wasn't, savable. I don't know exactly. I don't recall what it was or how it looked. But, it's kind of hard to fault a guy for giving up 2 goals when your team scored 0 goals. So kind of a deceiving game. I will say, I think the Phantoms severely outplayed Wilkes-Barre Scranton, which is pretty rare. And I think Kolosov played well enough to win that game, but had no goal support at all. And I just saw that right now. I'm just seeing that Philip Larson had an assist on one of the goals. And yeah, the first goal. So it was like literally a goalie breakout to 2 players, so complete miscue on the Phantoms. And the first period was even, and then the Phantoms took over the game, but we just could not score a goal.
That's kind of funny in the sense that, you have the Phantoms getting essentially no goal support, and then you also have the Flyers getting no goal support. So
Something in the water on that day.
Yeah, the NHL club and the AHL club are in sync, and they're aligned in terms of the lack of goal scoring right now.
Yeah.
But
I will say
that's tough for the Phantoms,
Andrae.
though. That's tough for the Phantoms, though, right? Like, to outshoot a team that much, you'd expect to at least score a goal. So
19 shots in the second.
I would imagine
no
if
goals.
they keep that recipe up and they keep playing in that way where they're significantly outshooting teams 41 to 17 like they did, that they'll probably win more games than they lose. So
yeah.
the process is there, right?
Yeah, and all I'm saying is that, like, on the surface level, people saw that Kolosov gave up 2 goals on 16 shots, but that's not really, like, that's why I don't love just pure stats.
It's hard if you didn't watch.
So I will say I can't say he had a bad game, but it was really just the inability for the Phantoms to score. They had a lot of scoring chances, I was telling you, I was like listening to the game in between periods, and Bob Roadtruck's like freaking out, and yeah, they just weren't able to put the puck in the net. So unfortunate for Kolosov to take the L on that one, but I don't think he played poorly. Again, only gave up 2 goals, and one was unsavable. So not too bad. We'll see how the Phantoms do moving forward, but it was frustrating to watch, especially while watching the Flyers get shut out 3-0. And their home opener, it was just like, oh my god, what is
Nothing's
going on
going
today?
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it was one of those days. Like Flyers could not find the back of the net, and they had plenty of opportunities to do so. Kept hitting the post, and then same thing with because I truly believe if the Flyers tied that game with Vancouver, they had enough scoring chances for the game to be 3-3.
I think it's a completely different game if Jonathan scores that empty net goal.
Yeah.
I think that would have made it 1-1. They get on the board, and then it's kind of like a different feel, but obviously not meant to be. I think for the Flyers in general, we're just gonna have to see them get to those high danger areas to create those more quality scoring chances moving ahead. Like that's gonna be their way of kind of getting their 5-on-5 play back on track, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right, let's do the prospect update. So I'll do the players, you do the goalies. Is that cool?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So again, we just kind of run through these quickly for those who haven't heard this before. We're not going in depth on them, just kind of running through stat updates. So Jack Berglund, it looks like he's primarily playing with the regular squad in the SHL at this point. He does have 12 points in 8 games with the under 20 Fjarkestad team. So he has 12 points in 8 games. So he's too good for that league. With the men, however, he has 1 assist in 7 games. Doesn't seem like he's probably playing that much either. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't been watching the games, but we will be having Steve Kornianos, in the beginning of December. We will go through the prospects in detail, and Jack Berglund will be one of them. Ilya Pautov came in red hot. He's still doing well, 11 points in 13 games in the MHL, so not bad, +5. Santeri Silku in the Mestis, still red hot, 7 games, 6 goals, 3 assists, 9 points. So he might graduate at some point this year to go play with the men. We'll see how he does. He's a big body, so I'm not sure he'll ever really have an offensive game, at the NHL level, but he could be a guy who could come over to the Phantoms maybe even next year if he continues to do what he's doing. Alex Ciernik, he is playing against men, 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points in 9 games. Pretty good for Alex. Heikki Rahonen, he started off real slow in the USHL. He had no points in the first 3 games. He now has 8 points in 9 games, 4 goals, 4 assists. Seems like he is taking off there. I'm excited to see how he develops. He's maybe one of the most intriguing prospects the Flyers have. Cole Knuble, who was extremely cold to start his season last year, coming in red hot. 4 games, 4 goals, 2 assists. Really good start for Cole. He's a +5 as well. Oliver Bonk, he's got in 5 games, 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points, continuing where he last left off, +3 in that span. Spencer Gill, 5 assists, +9 in 9 games. Pretty good. Want to see more offensive production, but not bad at all. So far, I imagine he'll evolve. Austin Malloy, 9 games, 4 assists, +7 in the U.S. Hockey League. Also, we have no idea what to expect with him. We'll see what happens as he evolves. Carter Sutherland, still struggling hard. 4 assists in 10 games, a -15. Again, that's a team low, -15. I don't know what happened to him, but he is not having the same type of season he had last year. Alex Bump, now a point per game in the NCAA, 1 goal, 2 assists in 3 games. He is a -3, though. Samu Tuomala did put up some points in the AHL so far. He's got a goal and 2 assists, 3 points in 3 games, also a -3. Mateo Mann, 7 games in the Q, 1 goal, 1 assist. I will say Rodrigo Abels, he's not a prospect, but he has 2 assists in 3 games for the Phantoms. Owen McClellan, 2 assists in 3 games for NCAA. I expect that those numbers will go up. Denver Barkey, who was just recently named captain. We talked about that last week. He's a -1, 2 assists in 5 games. Obviously, low production for what he is, but remember, he's coming back from mono. Expect him to struggle for a little bit here as he gets kind of ramped up. Um, Oscar Eklund's got a goal and 3 assists. Oh, I'm sorry, a goal in 3 games. Ethan Sampson's got a goal in 3 games, and that's good to see. He's been playing a lot more this year, so that's a good sign. Zayd Wisdom's got an assist in 2 games for the Phantoms. J.R. Avon's got an assist in 3 games. Elliot Denoye continues his struggles offensively so far. 1 assist in 3 games. Devin Kaplan, 1 assist in 3 games, so he finally had his first point. 23 penalty minutes in 3 games. And that's pretty much it. Hunter McDonald's got no points in 3 games. He's an even. And same goes with Yinning and Helge Grans. Noah Powell also starting off slowly. He has no points in 3 games, -2.
Okay, awesome. That was a bit of a handful for you to read all those stats.
I left some
We'll have to
names off too.
split it up a little more next time, maybe. Okay, so we'll go with the goalies. So first to start, Carson Bjarnason is playing with the Brandon Wheat Kings in the WHL. So far, Bjarnason has a 3-3 record. With a 3.02 goals against average and a 916 save percentage. His save percentage has risen since last week. So
He
we're
won 2 games in a row.
yeah, so he's, the team's been rebounding a bit with some wins where the team really started the season off with a lot of losses to begin here. Igor Zavragin is really the big goalie prospect everybody wants to hear about. With Sochi earlier in the season, in 6 games, he was 3-3. And in those 6 games, he had a 941 save percentage and a 2.21 goals against average with Sochi. With SKA St. Petersburg, which he's joined and been loaned back to, in 4 games, he's actually a perfect 3-0. He came in relief in one of those games. He's on a 3-game winning streak right now with SKA, which is really impressive on his age, based on his age, obviously. And save percentage with SKA through the 4 games is 906, and goals against average is 2.73. So the save percentage and goals against has gone down a little bit. In terms of,
oh, I'm sorry.
In terms of like his stats with SKA, but he still had really good stats, and he's 3-0 with SKA, so he's been performing really well.
Well, those numbers are a little deceiving because that relief game he came in was his first game, and they got shelled. SKA got their asses handed.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
so.
He gave up 4 goals in that game, so his numbers started off rock bottom and have been going up. So it's a little deceiving. His numbers since then have been great in those 2 games.
He's been amazing. Like I said, right, he's won 3 in a row to start his basically career with SKA essentially. So as a 19-year-old, there's really not much more you could ask for. And then the last goalie I wanted to go over is Alexei Kolosov, obviously, which we've talked about. In 3 games with the Phantoms, he actually has 1 assist. He is at 1-2 with 1 win and 2 losses. His save percentage is 0.878, and his goals against average is 3.06.
So we'll see how he does moving forward. I imagine those numbers will improve.
Yeah,
again,
definitely.
Early numbers are deceiving.
Yeah, and he's been sharp. There's been some goals against, but he's rebounded, right? Like the I think game last week he let 4 goals in to start the first period, but then had like 28 saves straight afterwards.
29 on 33 shots, I remember.
Oh, okay, awesome. I don't remember the exact stats.
I did. Worry. I don't know why I remember that, but I did. Yeah. So yeah, we'll have more updates on them as we move forward. And again, we're gonna do a prospect show with Steve in the beginning of December. So we'll have lots of updates there. We'll talk a bunch about Michkov as well. And then I assume we're going to be talking about Luchanko and in the OHL at that point as well.
And hopefully making the World Junior team. So
yeah, that would be sick. Yeah, that's how I want to be watching him this year. Not putting up 0 points in the NHL. Okay, that's it for us. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, everybody just, keep going to flyersnittygree.com, checking out all our content. We're, having articles released every day. Really appreciate the support with my latest article, the 5 observations after the first 5 games. As we've plugged here, please check that article out, and keep an eye out for the remainder of the articles in that series. I'm going to be releasing an article after every 5 games up until the 20 game mark, just posting my observations and kind of looking at trends and interesting stats that are coming up after each 5 game interval.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, definitely make sure to check that out. And that series will get better as he moves forward too, because there's gonna be more data and like
More
more
of a sample
references.
size.
Yeah.
Really, the whole point is after 20 games, usually that's enough of a sample size to understand what this team is. And that's kind of the goal of the whole series, right? We're going to
Yeah.
reach the 20 game mark, and then we'll finally know what this 2024-25 Philadelphia Flyers team really is.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, just want to remind everybody to please like and subscribe to the podcast here on YouTube. Hit the notification bell for notifications to get notified on when we release the episodes. Tonight we're recording on a Monday, because the games are on Tuesday and Wednesday this week. We usually try to work around the games. Also, make sure to hit the bell. Oh, I said that already. Hit the bell for notifications. Make sure to go check out Spotify and iTunes for our audio versions. We're also available on other sources, but give us a follow and a rating there as well. Those are the best way to support us with the subscriptions, with the likes, the reviews. Give us the follows. All that stuff helps our channel grow substantially. So thank you all so much for those who have done it. If you have not done it so far, please, 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 please do so. And also a shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Make sure to go to South Street and get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. And if you're at the stadium, you can get a Jim's cheesesteak there as well. And also Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all your insurance adjustment need. They will be your facilitator with the insurance company and help you with the parts you don't want to deal with. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also shout out to Sports Spider, our partner. Make sure to go to them for all of your sports aggregated news. They will collect all the latest videos, articles, podcasts from around the internet, specific to the team that you want to follow. It's a great site. Make sure to check it out. Again, the link is in the description. And I want to thank you all again for listening. Thank you for hanging with us for as long as you have. We like doing these long form. We cannot do less than like 90 minutes at this point. It's just like almost never happens. But thank you all for listening. We love you guys. And remember, always stay gritty.